Okay, welcome to Stampscaping 101. I was inspired by a photograph that I saw this morning. That was a photograph of a cave filled with glowworms on the ceiling. Okay, I thought it made for a really cool visual. It's like almost like a galaxy or some kind of deep space image, you know, kind of created by these glowing worms on the ceiling of the cave. It had a lot of variations of blue, this blue glowing light, okay? And then it's transitioned kind of out of the cave to the opening. It became kind of a warmer tinted area within that given space with the outdoor lighting coming in. It had a little figure down below there. You'll see it in this video if you watch it. But anyways, I placed that little character down here, and I put my waterfall down here just because I know that in some caves there's, you know, little streams running through it, so I thought I would add a little bit of variation down in this space right here, so I used the waterfall image. But anyways, this was a fun scene to do. I always like doing stars in my sky, but this seemed like it gave me an opportunity to, you know, do that same type of effect, but kind of representing a living creature there. So a lot of different blue gel pen dots and whatnot, and pigment ink effects up in that space up there. But I liked how that kind of transitioned out of there. This is a scene that I never would have done had I not seen that source material. So it's always kind of fun to, you know, if you're inspired by something, to go in there and try to, I don't know, not necessarily replicate, but to come up with something kind of that references those pieces, photographs, whatever. And to do it in ink, I guess, paper and ink. So that's what we do in stamping, isn't it, though? Try to create something kind of interesting from nothing, I guess. So fun stuff. Pretty simple composition. It's fairly, I don't know, involved, but very fast. Just because of the format. This is a half-size piece of paper right here. It's a 4 1/4 by 11 inches. So, but when I say at the end of this video is you really could do this scene with, it could be 2 stamps if you want it to be. If you want the waterfall in there, you have to have the waterfall. But you know, this rock down here could have been placed down here, and I could have used just this image built up over the whole thing, just use that little figurine in there, you know. But, you know, if you have some additional rock stamps and whatnot, and you want to create a little bit of variation, that's why you use something, you know, like that. So this right here, if you watch the video, is this whole overhanging kind of ceiling area. And just for a little bit of a textural change, I used this one. And I wanted to use these 2 stamps together in a scene, because I don't think I've ever done that before. I think I've used either that one or that one, so it was kind of nice to use both of them to represent different areas within this cave and a different distance in the cave, so a little bit more textured, and this one's a little bit more smooth, okay, representing something off in the distance. So anyway, thanks for tuning into the video or the channel. Hope you enjoy this scene and the creation of it, if you choose to sit through it and take a look. So thanks again. Okay, let's see what we can do about a cave with glowworms in it. I saw this really cool, I don't know, what is it, a Facebook share, or I don't know, whatever you call it, but there was these glowworm, I don't know, scenes or photographs, and one of them was like this video. And I thought, huh, I really like, I've seen that type of imagery before, and I thought it would be interesting to try out, I don't know, anytime you see this kind of dynamic these dynamic settings with interesting imagery. It's always one of those things you want to kind of try and get it down on paper if possible. I'm going to do, I don't know, my version of it just based on the stamps that I have, and I don't know, I thought I can vary it a little bit with some a little bit of variation in terms of the setting. Okay. I don't, most of the times if I see something, I try not to, you know, try to be so faithful to you know, the source material like a photograph, or the inspiration material rather, because it's, you know, we're working with a set grouping of images, and I don't know, sometimes if you try to get locked in too much, it just becomes very difficult to you know, kind of mimic or replicate, so it's better just to mix it up from what I've found. Or you can start off, you know, trying to get it as close as you can, but inevitably I find it's just better to stray from that and to just kind of go off and start doing your own thing. Okay, now basically what I'm looking at is there was this photograph taken from within a cave. So we saw this big kind of a diagonal kind of a overhang, you know, with the cave ceiling up here, and then there was this little opening down here where this little figure was kind of looking into the cave. It's really good in terms of this dynamic focal point of having a figure down here. I'm thinking about using this little man here. Not really the couple. I don't think it would be a, you know, inside of a cave as far as like a romantic stroll, so we're not going to do that, although you could, but I'm not going to do that. But anyways, I'm thinking about a combination of some of these ledges here. Okay, and I don't know, let's see. I thought I would try these two together. I usually use one or the other, the ledge and the boulders with Lichen. They're really similar designs in terms of how they're used, but I don't think I've used them together before. But we'll see. All right. This one, you know, after I get the composition set, I have a feeling, I think it'll be pretty easy to, well, maybe that's not the word. It'll be quick to kind of render the rest of the scene out, because it's, for the most part, it's really dark, you know, because it's a cave, and when I start adding in the effects of these worms, it should be, you know, just, you know, a lot of darker inks. I'm not going for, you know, great, you know, variations in hue and temperature and all that. Just, you know, it's just dark, you know, so we'll see how that goes. Alright, just overlapping, and you can change the angle slightly if you want to. Alright, just kind of build up this big kind of wall here. When you start, if I start doing a lot of scenes on a regular basis, when I look at a photograph or something like that, I feel pretty confident as far as being able to achieve something, either be it in the composition or colors or something like that. You know, not replication, but, you know, kind of this, I don't know, matching the, I don't know, kind of the spirit or inspiration of the piece a little bit. Alright, let's change the angle of this one a little bit. It's kind of going in, you know, a certain direction, but the cave can be kind of altered a little bit, so let's go like this and say that there's another shelf coming back this way. Alright, but this is going to be really dark. And I am working in a half sheet of letter-sized paper. I felt that I could have done it on a quarter page, but I needed more kind of breathing room to play around with the composition. I felt that I just needed more space in here. So we're going half. Alright, let's see. I'm going to try to make a little opening. This little guy is going to be down here. I like the idea of this underwater stream, okay, which there often is in caves. There's running water. Sometimes the caves have been formed by that underground stream over millions of years or whatever. I happen to like kind of exploring caves. I've never done like real kind of a hardcore spelunking or anything like that, but whenever we've gone out hiking, I've always loved dropping down into caves whenever out in Joshua Tree and exploring those types of areas, abandoned mine shafts. Which you're not supposed to go into. I'm fairly safe. If I see some kind of old timbers or something like that that don't look stable, I'm not going to go in there. But if it looks fairly stable, I don't really have any problem with that. I'm not really claustrophobic at all. Okay, kind of making an opening out there. Got a little piece of lint on the... which rock was that? It was right there. Doesn't matter. Okay, so kind of making that. I don't know, this is the ledge with the brush. I figured I would add that in. It's kind of getting towards the opening. Let's see. Here's the smaller boulders with the lichen. Figuring it out. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to figure out. Okay, I got that little figure here. In something like this, where we're talking about a really enclosed space, there's a little bit of planning, especially if you're going to add in a little figure down there that's going to be such a significant focal point. So, you know, you just have to remember to just leave room for it. You know, and like having like stamping like a big meadow or something like that, where, you know, you can kind of render the entire scene and it doesn't really matter because there's plenty of space for, you know, additional embellishment as far as like figures and animals and things like that go. But when you're talking about a much smaller space, just work your composition around, you know, that given space right here, or area or whatnot, you know. If you get a stamp person in there or animal, and it's a very small space, just don't cover that space with something, in other words. Okay, that's that right there. Okay, let's continue that idea out here. I'll build that out a little bit. Now everything's kind of blending together really well, which is something that, you know, of course with scenic stamping you want, but after you blend it together in terms of compositionally, what I'll have to do is I'll have to kind of separate it in terms of representational distance. So I want this overhanging ledge to seem much closer to us, and I want this to seem farther back in the distance within the scene, so I'll be doing that with tone. Anyways, this is getting pretty crazy. let's see, maybe I might want to go with a different texture down there just for a change. Otherwise it's kind of going to have that exact Boulders with Lichen texturing on it, which is fine, but I'm going to go for a little bit more variation, I think. Just masking off with paper towels is absolutely sufficient when it comes to this. Have a little bit of your imagery showing so that you don't get that mask ghosting or whatever haloing effect. You know, where there's a big white gap in between the images. If you don't get some of this image in the imagery already stamped out, that's fine, because these are tonal designs, not linear designs, so, you know, where you get it going into other images, it doesn't, you know, it's not really apparent. Okay, I think I've left a good opening here for this figure. Maybe one more, like right there. I don't know, when you're doing something like this, this will be like a really small thing, but if you're stamping your first and last glowworm scene, you might as well get it just the way you want it. I don't know, maybe I'll do another glowworm scene in my life, I don't know. But I haven't done one yet, so I don't know if I'll be doing another one after this. Cover that up right there. One good thing about paper towel masking, huh? Just rip off a piece and you have what you need. Okay. There's another one here. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Let me see this here, though. I'm going to have just a kind of a dull impression of this right here. Like it's farther back, because it's stamping out in gray instead of kind of a dark black. Okay. Maybe. We'll see. Okay, so something like that. And now see if I stamp this figure right here, it'll be in black, and that won't be so obtrusive. So, pretty crazy, huh? I think so. Okay, so the light is going to be coming from in here, like the figure is, I wanted another thing. I want to create layers in here. Alright, that looks a little better. It's like this is coming kind of at you, and this is really prominent in the foreground. This will be kind of a little bit illuminated right around here. You know, like there's an opening to the cave, and we'll make this really dark up here for the little glowing little glowworms. I need to take a look at that reference material again. I think it was like a fairly light blue in terms of hue. Okay. Alright, so let's see. This big scene. I'm going to move my camera up here a little bit just so I can get, if I start working, you know, all over the place, I won't go off screen. Okay, so this is this ledge right here, okay? This big overhanging ledge, alright? There's a lot of repetition in there and pattern, and I don't necessarily want that. Okay, I want there to be a lot of variation. I want it to look like one continuous piece, not like wallpaper where you see this repeating pattern over and over again, okay? So, let's take some black ink. You can start off with gray if you want to, but I'm just going to go on straight with black for right now and just start to add some tone in here. It's a little bit kind of sticky in terms of, not in terms of tacky, but I can feel the paper kind of grabbing this sponge applicator because this is a very dry piece of paper at this point in time with nothing laid down on it. So the ink is really absorbing quite fast, and like I said, it's a little bit absorbent, and you know, when you're applying this applicator or this ink via the applicator to the paper, you know, it's kind of a dry process. So in other words, what I'm getting at is you don't want to scrub with this trying to make things super dark, you know, too fast. Okay, now I just did a video talking about how to render some forms in order to make them look a little bit more dimensional, and you can kind of do that if you want to, but there's not going to be a whole lot of variation in here. Okay, and these rocks are supposed to be in, you know, practically pitch black. Okay, I do want some detail in them, so I'm not going to make them absolutely black, but we do want those little glowworms to stand out, so the darker you make it, potentially you can get a much lighter looking glowworm. So we're going to make it pretty dark in here. Some areas might be just pitch black, you know. They're totally inked out. We'll see. Alright, so just kind of take it nice and easy. You don't want a bunch of these shapes everywhere, although you can kind of do some of that, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't. I would kind of keep it a controlled process, okay? And no matter how dark this ends up getting, it's better to kind of move into that value incrementally and carefully rather than, you know, potentially getting some marks that you might not want and having to kind of blend them into the composition. It's just easier just to not have them in the first place. But, you know, we get them occasionally. You know, it doesn't happen too often with me because I take things in a nice incremental fashion, but, you know, it's better to not have, you know, to avoid those types of things if possible from the beginning. And what I mean specifically is, you know, if you get a bunch of, like, shapes of your applicator, like something like that, you know, then you kind of have to blend it in a little bit more. You know, it's not going to take a lot of effort, especially with a scene like this, where it's going to be very dark in there anyway. But nice and slow. It's really ergonomic for your hands this way, too. I'm not pounding this. It's just a very light touch. And I'm turning my paper, okay, in the direction that's the most conducive for a ergonomic application, okay. I don't always have to have, you know, have my scene kind of right side up, you know, in terms of what the final result will look like. Because then I'd be tapping like this, and then this hand starts to go, you know, in ways that aren't really comfortable, okay? So it's looking less like, you know, like a wallpaper pattern, you know, with too much repetition. Okay. Okay, let me create a little bit of a separation between this foreground ledge. This is there it is right there. Right, this big, huge, overhanging kind of a cave ceiling. My kind of instincts are to leave some areas just white, but I don't want to do that too much. Well, I'm still going to apply some color on here because I want that kind of glow to be in there, but I want it pretty dark as far as my foundation goes. Okay, let's start to make some of these forms a little bit more kind of rounded. That's like that volume video that I just did. It means just to look at an object and instead of seeing it as something to color uniformly, you're just kind of varying your amount of ink laid across it. Okay, so in the shadows, hit the shadows with a little bit of tone, and in the lighter areas, just leave it as is, you know, which is basically the point of that video, or the main concept of it, I should say. So we look at individual rocks in here, and give a little bit of a depth and variation to them. If you want some areas of the shelf to look a little bit different, okay, or it's not a shelf but a ceiling, okay, then I can kind of put some tone across a certain area of it like this, and it'll kind of push it back a little bit farther visually. I love, what do you call it, bioluminescence. I love watching those documentaries on that, and I had a little bit of first-hand experience with that one time when I used to go surfing. I used to love going surfing at night. And one time, there was all that, what do you call it, phosphorescent plankton, I think it is. And so the waves were like glowing this, I think it was like a pale blue-ish color. Or if you just ran your hands around in the water and swished around a little bit, it would it illuminated. It was really quite fascinating. Alright, so there we have our overhanging ceiling. Okay. Let me tone this out a little bit more. Let me go a little bit darker in a couple areas here. Alright. Easy enough. When you do these kind of monochromatic foundations, it really comes around pretty fast, relatively fast. Now I will work some color into here though, but for the most part the foundation of my kind of coloring, you know, my coloring, shading, and thus lighting schemes really come around very quickly. Only having to work with grayscale. and I am working with black ink, but what I mean by grayscale is I'm using this black ink in just various quantities of it, applications of it, to achieve these kind of grayscale values. Okay. So I want to create a little bit of a separation between this and this. Okay, let's look at the water down here. Or I tell you what, I'll do this wall here first. This right side wall. Okay, I'll put most of it in shade to begin with, and then I'll just deepen some of the values, or rather darken some of the values. Okay, so we're starting to get that little bit of this kind of idea of light kind of coming in from the opening of the cave. It's like one of those things with scenic stamping. I've been asked if, you know, the different imagery that I design and or stamp, if they're places that I have seen before or what, you know. And some of the places, the settings might be places that I don't know, that I've been inspired by or whatever and want to do something similar, but I think for the most part it's, you know, I stamp out the places I'd like to see or be at or whatever, and in the course of time that it takes you to stamp something out, and it's especially when I'm kind of adding in the details, you know, they're kind of transportive. It's like you can kind of be in that environment that you're doing or creating in some ways, you know, kind of like a little mental journey, which is kind of fun. Okay. Coming together a little bit. See that little opening there? That little area is a little bit too light. Let's create a little bit more separation between this kind of layer of distance, I guess, and the background one. Okay, so it's like we're kind of turning now, moving back into that area. These areas here are a little bit too light. Let's darken them up a little bit. So it's like I really like doing these kind of, I like finishing off, kind of putting the final touches on any or every kind of segment, I guess you can say, of a scene. I like doing the composition. I like putting the final touches on the compositions, the tweaks. And then in the toning or coloring process, I like putting on those little final touches of the of that process. And then there's like little embellishments, as something gets further and further along. It's all those little refinements that kind of push things a little bit more, so if you want something to look really illuminated or light and kind of magical, it's like doing that extra little tweak and pushing it a little bit more. And those are the things that for me are really fun to do. So anyways, what I'm getting at here is I'm doing the lighting in here, and I'm kind of creating this little passage right down here as it moves back, and it's looking a little bit more the space looks a little bit deeper, I guess, the more I do this, and the more I kind of alter it and tweak it a little bit. Specifically to this scene, I'm kind of making things a little bit darker around here, and as it moves forward, but I am creating this, decent separation right here between this area and this area. Okay. But for the most part, it's kind of darker out here, and it gets lighter over there as it moves through. Okay, let's start addressing my little underground stream. Going on, adding some tone to these rocks, kind of fleshes them out a little bit. There is value and tone in the rocks inherently, but I'm going in and rendering them a little bit more, or I guess a lot more, with some additional grayscale, okay? Meaning I'm actually putting some gray into it. I know it's black ink, but if you kind of just have a little bit on your tip, you're putting a much smaller amount of it down than just straight black. So, of course, it reads as gray, okay? A little bit of depth being created, huh? In kind of a claustrophobic little setting here. Alright, I need to create a little bit more space here. My large acrylic block here. I'm glad I finally got around to cleaning my workspace here. Just hundreds and hundreds of stamps I don't know, not hundreds and hundreds, maybe 100 stamps. I finally got around to cleaning off and reorganizing them. Or not reorganizing, refiling them. When I start doing a lot of scenes, I don't necessarily like taking the time out to kind of tidy up after every scene. There's so many scenes I need to get to, or want to. And then there are those scenes that you kind of plan, and there's ones that kind of come up and spur of the moment, like this one. Who knew? I saw worms this morning and had to stamp them. Okay, see at the base of the waterfall down here, I'm kind of keeping it a little bit light, or lighter. It might end up being too light, but we'll see. Okay, so we have something like this. Right. A little bit too light probably, but I'll put some color over that. This area in here can use a little bit of refinement, I think. Let's add a little bit of a darker tone in here. Just to create a little bit of distance between this ledge right here, rock, and this one in the background. It's looking a little ambiguous in there. I want to create more of a kind of a definitive separation between a couple of these spaces in here. Okay, alright. Do we have a good worm setting here? Kind of adding my grayscale in here, that the water's a little bit too light. And like I said, I can add some tone to it, but I'll just go for this right now. Okay. Interesting. I want a little bit of separation here, so I'm trying to decide if I want the waterfall to be darker or if I want these boulders and kind of the vertical ones to be darker. I'll go with it doesn't really matter which one you choose, you know, to create that kind of separation. There just has to be, you know, some kind of value change between either one of them. To me, I don't know, one didn't necessarily sound better than the other. It could have been either one, so just pick one and just go with it. Okay, so see that? It kind of pushes it back a little bit. I think in terms visually in the distance, it's a little bit too light right there, I think, too, so let's go into that. Okay, and this overhang, I'll go a little bit darker here to create a separation between that ceiling and the background cave walls. Alright, do we have enough here? And I'm spending a lot of time on the little tweaks here. I want to get this kind of foundation set. Okay, I think that is it. Just as I say that, a little darker down here on the corners, I think. Okay, and I'll go top two corners just for really strong vignette. Okay, I'm going to go and reference those photographs that I saw. I need to go to my computer, and I want to get kind of an idea of the clustering, and I want to see what kind of colors were kind of reflecting off those rocks that I saw. It seemed really specific, so I need to check out that again. But anyways, I'm going to wait to stamp this little figure in here, because I might want to make this some sort of a different hue other than blue, white right now. So I'm going to check that out. And we'll see. Okay, I have reviewed that photo, and we're looking at kind of bluish, slightly turquoise-ish tones. Okay, so I'll stick with mainly those colors. Oh, I happen to have a Caribbean blue too, so this one right here. This one, I didn't use that for a long time. I don't know, I just didn't, not for any particular reason. But I think that one will be good. And those little glowworms, they're kind of a little bit more clustered in the photograph that I just looked at. The inspiration photograph. You can go to the Stampscapes not website, but Facebook page and take a look if you feel so inclined, but it's going to be really similar if you've seen other videos that I've done where I've added stars using like a gel pen and little kind of glowing features with the pigment ink. Anyways, I'll get to that when I get to that, but let's go in here and start adding in some tones. Okay, this is a Memento Summer Sky right now that I'll be adding in here. It's going to be very, very light in hue, okay? Because Memento Summer Sky is a very light hue, okay? So you'll barely see it. It's just going to be a slight tint, maybe, if you can see it on camera here, of this particular hue, okay? But like I said, yeah, it's just like adding stars, but instead of making it so random, we'll kind of cluster it. These little worms, you know, like all living things, or almost every living thing, they're, for the most part, fairly communal. So, something like that. Okay. I don't know if you can tell any difference there. There's blue up here, but here's more just, it's like grayscale. Alright. I'll add a little bit on these rocks over here, but I think for the most part I'll put them up here. I might put them over here as well, but maybe a little bit less. Okay. Okay, let's come down here in my water as well. And I think I want to give this a little bit of a warm tinge over this way, okay? Like where some warm light from the outside is coming into the scene, so I'll kind of keep some of this blue away from this area. It's very subtle, but I like to start really light like that and to work into my incrementally darker values within a given hue. Okay. This is the Salvia blue. It's not too bright of a blue, but brighter than Summer Sky. Brighter, not lighter, so I'm talking about just the relative intensity of a given hue. Okay. So I'm kind of tinting these rocks a certain color. And, I mean, they are, while they're not really dark colors, they are a tint, so they are going to make this area in here a little bit darker. And these first colors, though, hopefully they just kind of make them seem a little bit more richer, I guess, in terms of the color. I mean, it's monochromatic, you know, before I started hitting it with some color, but you can achieve some nice depth, see that, in there than just, you know, strictly grayscale. Okay. Okay, there's a fairly light blue. This is what the salvia blue looks like, by the way. Okay. Nothing too intense. If you add more of it, it gets darker, but that's about as dark as it gets. Okay, let's start adding a little bit of this Caribbean blue. I might end up adding a lot of it by the time it's all done, but we'll add a little bit to begin with. While it's, you know, pretty similar hue as the other two blues, it does add that element of warmth, okay, in that it does have a little bit of yellow in it, creating kind of more of a greenish, blue-greenish tint. It's still more on the blue side than, say, the green, though, of course. So. But anytime you start kind of playing around with a change of temperature, I guess, and or hue, you kind of want it. I would recommend taking it slowly and you know, so you can really get a good feel of what's happening on the scene. Okay, it's one thing to kind of know the color, but what it's going to look like over the top of, in this case, all this grayscale, or if you have other colors that you're using on another scene, just seeing how it's going to affect the overall. Okay, so it's what I like to do. What I mean by that is I like to add a little bit down and get a feel for it, and then if I keep adding more and more, you know, that area kind of changes, so you can really see it here. It's a real different it's a real different look. It's very bright in comparison to everything else down there. So we're adding hue, you know, in terms of color. You're adding a temperature, and you know, it's a little bit of a warmer blue, and you're also adding intensity, which is, you know, fairly bright over the top of all this. So in other words, just take it slow, and you'll have a lot of control over it. You get a feel for how something looks. You don't have, it's not, there's no point in time, it's like kind of putting a blindfold on and just saying, I'm just going for it, you know, or something like that. It's, you know, that you can make the, you can kind of extend the process out, and make it nice and easy. Without too many unforeseen marks. Okay. Kind of already glowing, right? And these things are called glowworms. So that's going to represent some of the light that they are giving off. Okay. I think we have a pretty good foundation for our worms. All right, now let's take a look in here and think about some kind of color for that area. I want it fairly warm. This is a warm color, this desert sand, and that's kind of the general color, but I think there's probably an even stronger choice of something. This might be a case for pens, okay. Alcohol pens. Well, let me try this first. Okay, this is a peach Bellini. It's a old Adirondack Lights. Let me see, they call it peach Bellini. This one is called Seashells, but they changed the name at one point. These are discontinued, but these are just very pale, very light colors. They were shadow stamping inks, if you know what those are. You would stamp, in concept, you would stamp out like a word or something like that in whatever color, black, and then you would take, you know, your shadow stamping ink and you would kind of offset that again and stamp it again where it looked like it was casting a shadow on your paper. Really fantastic, but you know, there's not too many people that found a need for that. Although I love these pads for their value, which is very pale. That's something that I utilized a lot in my scenes. I like going from light to dark. But anyways, the entire Adirondack line was discontinued, which surprised me. Not just the lights, okay? So anyways, here we go. I'm adding in some of this tone, and that's kind of creating a nice warm opening like that. Okay, see that warmth? It's like there's a change in temperature now within this given space, and I'm adding this pretty much in full whatever force or whatever, because this color is like that color right there. It's really, really light. Okay, that ended up being pretty good. If you don't have something like that, oh, let me see here. Something like Distress Inks, Antique Linen, Tea Dye are good choices. Antique Linen, I believe, is even lighter than Tea Dye, so let me try that one out. Let's put it up next to one another. You see, it's really light. So luckily, the Distress Inks are still out there and accessible. Let's try the Tea Dye. Maybe more of a slightly brownish tinge to it than the Antique Linen. Okay. Alright, a couple Distress Inks in there, just to mix things up a little bit. Actually, I didn't really mix them up a little bit, it looks really similar. Okay, here's a little bit of the desert sand. I don't know, not really doing too much, doesn't need to, but enough of that. Okay, and okay, I think that addressed my warm needs. You know, there's plenty of choices here. You don't have to use all. I used 4 different colors for this little tint in there, and you really only need one, probably. You can potentially get a little richer, you know, depending on how many colors you're using, but you really don't have to. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to find that black that I used here. I've allowed this to set up a little bit, and I think what I want to do is bit darker on some of these rocks. I just went back to my black ink. Creating a little bit more depth within the rocks again. Okay. One of the things that I was considering doing, and I'm still contemplating, is whether or not I want to do some kind of little hanging roots in here just for some additional layering effects. I think it might make an interesting texture. You know, to have some of this kind of, not everywhere, of course, but in a couple areas. I think I might wait to do that, though. Okay, I think I'm going to add those little worms first. Okay, this little figure here. One of the things I was thinking about with this figure is if I would have a little bit of a, like a headlamp on him, you know, with a beam coming out, or maybe just kind of a glow around his head. All right. Okay. Let's add them in. Going to just try and be careful about only coloring the one figure. Okay. Now, I think I'm going to put the figure kind of behind the rock, so I'll mask off that rock a bit. And the figure will be about right here. This will give us the scene a good reference point as far as scale goes. And it's like, how big is this cave? Okay. Alright. Kind of creates that nice focal point, huh? This looks like a big eyeball now, and that's like the little pupil, like a reptilian eye or something like that. Okay, so that worked out just fine. You know, I've been stamping a long time, but it's still a little bit nerve-wracking to do like that big of a scene and then come in here like that with like some little, you know, the smallest of elements, and it's like, okay, let me make sure I get this stamped out right. Oh, I can use this too. This is this little brush for some additional texture if I want. Okay, let's see here. I think I'm going to reference those worms again. I want to see if they're kind of on the rounded end or if they're in kind of the crevices portion. I'll put it like here and there. And I want to see which. I think from what I remember is kind of these little glowing things. There's various sizes of them too, so. And also I'll see if I want to go deeper with some additional blue in here too. Or if I just want to keep it with the that Caribbean blue, if there's some deeper saturations in there. But if there isn't, I'm pretty happy with that color scheme. Let's see, that was the Caribbean blue. Actually, let me try this one right here. This is a pretty bright blue right here in the light blue. Yeah. I'll add a little bit of it to the scene. Okay. It became a little bit more intense in a couple areas. Okay. This is practically black up there, but I don't know. Sometimes if you add a little tint to it, it becomes even blacker and richer and with a little bit more depth. Okay, let me go take a look at those worms again. Maybe I'll put it on my iPad and bring it on over here. Okay, finally got around, or got my iPad around to being able to load this. This is off of the this World Vacation. I don't know if that's a member, if that's a business or whatever. But there's those little stars. Looks like a Milky Way up there, doesn't it? So I shouldn't have too difficult a time, but not too bad, you know, as far as, you know, referencing that, I guess. Seems like it can get a little bit more intense on that blue up there. Okay. This will look much more saturated as I will spray seal it, but this is what I was going after. Okay, this is why I needed to reference that. I wanted to see just how far you can kind of take that, the intensity, and the answer is quite far. That blue, kind of bluish, glowing light. Okay. So see, there's kind of little clusters of those little worms here and there, you know, like that. It's like they kind of trickle out here and there. And that looks really fun. And, kind of do a self-study glowworm course right now, and just how and where to apply them, or I don't know, whatever, create them. Okay. I tell you what, I'm going to do this overhanging ceiling in blue. I had a little bit of that color down there, but in the photograph it doesn't, and I kind of like that, just to create that kind of separation as far as distance goes. Okay, I will say that the ceiling is kind of a little bit farther away from you know, this figure right here. This is very foreground oriented. Okay. All right, so there we go. It's like a real, like another world up there, isn't it? Okay, so I shouldn't be too shy about really clustering some of those little, I don't know, what are they, a bug or, I don't know, into that area. Alright, here it goes. Let me put a little bit more of this blue down here first. Alright. Alright, sorry. I really want to get this color down correctly. It's kind of all about that intensity up there, you know, in terms of that, achieving that glow. You know, for the glow worm, I guess it, you know, stands, you know, reason. Okay. Kind of glowing. It's a different hue, though, isn't it? Let me try something. Let me try a little bit of this. It's just called blue. It's the Marvy blue, which is basically a navy blue. Real similar to Danube blue and the Memento line or any other kind of a darker blue. Give it a try. Okay. Doesn't have to be brand specific. It is dye-based inks though, so I wouldn't do this in like a pigment ink or something like that, you know, with so many layers. You can try this scene though in a different medium too. It doesn't have to be dye-based inks. Dye-based inks though in this case are going to get you a pretty good saturation in terms of the values you can achieve. Okay, colored pencils, they tend to be a little bit lighter in terms of values, but I don't know, all kinds of things you can experiment with. Can you imagine, I don't know, some different textures from, I don't know, alcohol inks in there, whatnot, which you can also use, you can color on. I just did this whole scene yesterday. Go on at little alcohol marked flourishes. If you want to get into kind of more specific areas, you can do that. This rock right here would be really hard to color with that sponge, so I can just come right in here with a pen. More of this greenish tint. Couple areas there. Okay. I'll get to the worms, I promise. It's like I start doing this, it's like, oh, I forgot that, or I forgot, you know, I had these pens, you know, that worked really great on the scene yesterday. So you might as well add it in. But if you didn't have the pens, no problem, you don't have to do them. But if you have the stuff, might as well just kind of play around with it and see how it looks. kind of going in with a darker tone, and then I'm going in with a lighter tone and kind of blending it out a little bit. Okay, that looks like a nice glow there. And one of the things here is, this is a brownish gray. I can kind of come into these areas in here. This kind of the more detailed areas right around here where I thought, yeah, it could be addressed. I was fine with it, but here, let's go in here with a pen and kind of give a little bit more volume to these background rock formations. I can add little shadows down here. I can put deeper shadows in the cracks. You can add texture to the rocks as well, something like this. You can, you know, just in general, you can get just much more specific. Okay, that looks better right there. What I meant by specifics, like seeing these cracks, right? Yeah, it's too dark. Look at these cracks in these rocks. I can just kind of go and reiterate that a little bit more with some additional tone. I can get right on in there. And it just kind of rounds the form out a little bit more, making it look a little bit more dimensional. Okay, so we have that right there. There's a little figure right there. So that's my inspiration piece right down there. So that transition between light or warm and cool right here happens just right across that water. So that's why I always kind of recommend not seeing just this body of water or a given space in terms of one flat area, but to transition it in terms of there's light and dark, but it's also warm to cool. So that's what I'm trying to do, kind of in, you know, this general area. You know, in a, I don't know, I guess a simplistic way, you know. It's kind of hard to live up to a photograph, you know, kind of a dynamic setting, you know, especially if the photograph is a really good one, so. But you can, you know, achieve, you know, some decent looks and whatnot. All right. I tell you what, there's all kinds of different, who knows what this looks like in first person, but see all these little dots up here, they aren't just white, okay, there's, in the photograph there's some that look more kind of bluish in hue. I think I'm going to start off with that, alright, and, oh, let me see what choices. Here's this Sharpie paint pen. Here's the Uniball Signo blue gel pen. Okay. This one's probably a 0.5 or a 0.7. I don't know if it says on here. In terms of thickness, this one's a little bit different too. This one's actually using paint. As far as the Sharpie goes. This one's a little bit lighter in hue. I think I like that. I'll probably use all three. Like I said, you know, might as well just play around with them. If you have some different gel pens, try them out. Okay. kind of clustering them, putting some of these little dots closer than others, as there's a worm or two kind of on its own. You'll see these kind of isolated dots here and there. Kind of in general, I'm kind of starting in these lighter areas because those are the areas that are, you know, supposed to be illuminated by these worms. Make some of these dots a little bit larger, as I do see there's kind of larger areas glowing. I don't know what they are, a larger worm or something around in that area. So far this has been a really fun scene to do. This is the part that I've been kind of curious about and looking forward to, of course. It's putting these types of touches into the scene. You know, when I'm doing this, it's usually, you know, when it's in this area of the composition, it's usually representing stars or, you know, that type of thing, not worms. Yeah, so far so good. Looking pretty wormy. Everything is really central right now, which is fine, but let's trail some of these off a little bit. See the little dot over there, there's an isolated kind of glow. Some of the hardest things to do once in a while is to create this kind of this feeling of, I guess in this case it's not going to be random, but a little bit more of a kind of a random array, you know, and to vary things, okay? We tend to get caught into creating patterns, I find. So in something like this, it's good to see like this, it's really clustered, and over here it's kind of sparse, and overall it makes for kind of a little bit of a different texture or pattern. Alright, so let's do something like that. Let's let me see, I'll do it right over here, maybe. Okay, yeah, just something like that. Just so it's a little bit different. Okay. Alright, now I normally do things where I carry some idea out to another area of the scene so that it creates a little bit of continuity, but in this case we don't necessarily want that because there's not glowworms sitting on the floor of the cave, so I don't want to do something like that. But it's like, do I want little dots down here as far as kind of the churning of the water? Yeah, maybe. Alright, now that is that color. Let's go on with, let's build it a little bit more. Okay, this is a little bit of a darker blue. It's not dark blue, but it's darker than the Sharpie. Yeah. This, now when I put this Uniball blue next to the Sharpie one, it almost makes the Sharpie look white because this is, you know, dark enough, or enough of a change of hue that by contrast the Sharpie looks much lighter. You can get gel pens very inexpensively now. My set of 180 colors was about $25, I think, and something like that. Not the Uniball one. Uniballs are better. The inks are, I don't know, kind of denser. The gel. But those other sets, you know, are pretty good, though. They're just, I find the colors a little bit more translucent, so if you put it over the top of something like this, they might, you know, they won't show up as much. Not that you have to have it showing up, you know, as much, but okay. Okay. Glowworms galore. Okay, that was that. Now comes the, those were Oh, I don't know. This one might have been a 1.0 in terms of the thickness. I don't know if it says it on the pen. It just says extra fine. It's this set of Sharpies right here. That green one might be... That green one might be kind of nice. I'm not sure. But, okay. This is a 1.0. You can use a smaller pen, and if you want a larger dot, then you just kind of, you know, make it yourself. You just kind of scribble it. But on this one right here, we're starting with a, you know, a larger dot to begin with. But that being said, I can also get a smaller one just by doing a tiny little touch, you know. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of textural variation in here, or value variation within those little clusters of detail, right? So those little white dots really stand out, and then we have the blue ones back there. Okay. So it's just kind of interesting in these areas now. We're talking about these little dots become the little sources of light within this given space, and all they are is a little tiny dot. Here's our textures above. Okay, now let's add a little bit of texturing down here around our base of the waterfall. That churning water. I like to kind of add a little bit of a splashing element to it. It's kind of a way to go back in and introduce a little bit more of a detailed, crisp mark. In an area that otherwise became kind of more ambiguous with all that color and kind of less contrast. Yeah, little highlights down here in your water. See, there's little highlights around that opening of the cave where it's kind of lighter in there. I don't know, I mean, it's a photograph, but you can kind of create a little bit of a highlight like that with your gel pen. Where the light is hitting it. lighting on there. It's kind of on the top, or I don't know, on the surfaces that are kind of facing that light source. So we can kind of create a little bit of a passage of light within that space by just adding these little highlights to various elements around that light source. What it does is it ends up kind of makes it look like it's leading up to that area. You don't want to put too much, you know, it depends how relatively close your objects are to that opening and light source, you know, as far as how much you put on there. Okay, so we have that. Alright, let's try to make these those little worms glow. Okay, I'm going to come into it with a cotton swab, and we'll apply some pigment ink in here. Okay, I want to try to achieve some, I don't know, this kind of glowing effect. Oh, let's see here. This will be a perfect opportunity to use some of this robin's egg blue as well. Okay. So maybe I'll use the white after this one, but let me try the robin's egg first. Okay. You just apply some to your cotton swab. Alright, a little bit like that. If your pigment inks are fairly wet, then really dab them off a little bit before you go on. The dabbing part also kind of smashes the tip, and I'm kind of shaping my tip a little bit, as much as you really can with something like this. You know, a lot of times you just have to go with whatever you come up with. But alright. So the way I approach it is I start to kind of dab around some of my larger, in this case, dots, which would represent a worm. And what this is it's kind of diffusing the imagery that you have underneath it. In this case, it's all these little dots. Okay, and that's what you want. You want, these aren't like a laser you know, light worms. They're glow worms. So you want to create that kind of glowing kind of feeling. So that's where kind of these applications of pigment ink come into play, and it creates that softer kind of diffusion around these really crisp little dots. Okay, some of them you want to keep, you know, fairly crisp just for a textural variation, but for the most part, you know, I'll be going over, you know, maybe the majority of them. But you just have to kind of eyeball it and just go along with what seems to look, you know, good to you. Now I am using this robin's egg, but if you have only white, then try that. I am going to be using white on here. I just wanted to start off with a darker one first, just to, I don't know, take a look and see what it's going to look like. And again, over all of this other color, you know. So I'm just adding in these kind of light translucent applications of it. Nothing harsh or anything like that about it. It's a very relaxing process, by the way, adding this type of application to a given scene. Not talking about just glowworm scenes, but just in terms of any type of scene where kind of a softer appearance of any given object or thing, mark, you know, is something that you can benefit from. Kind of getting there. It's looking a little bit more kind of diffused and soft and kind of like a nice glowing light. You have to apply a little bit more than what you think you'll need, because the pigment inks applied this way do tend to dry darker than what they look like when you first apply it. From my experience. Could just be my brand, but I don't know. This area here seems a little bit softer and kind of glowing, maybe. Is this area up here? See that little dot? I'll show you what this looks like before and after. Okay, so there's that dot again, with just a little bit of tapping over the top of it. Not a thick application of this gel ink, pigment ink, but just a very light one to get a little bit of that textural variation and lighter appearance. Alright, that is that. Now let's go on with the white. The white will have a little bit more of a visible impact. Okay, now I'm using a very dry white here, white pad. It's been used for many, many years, so I'm not worried about putting a big blob of paint down, but remember to kind of tap off your color, and that in turn kind of flattens your tip a little bit. Okay, and yeah, this is much, much lighter. See that right in there? It's almost too much. I'll need to kind of spread that out a little bit. What I did with my finger there, I just dabbed it a little bit, and a lot of it came off because it was just too much. So when I'm doing this, often in the process, is I'm removing more ink than I end up applying. Alright, let's do the same thing down here in the water, not creating worms, but let's create kind of this misty kind of base of the waterfall. It's good for textural variation, illumination. Okay, now where this little figure is entering the scene, let's soften some of those objects around the figure, making it look as though they're coming in from the light, so we will put them in some of that light. or I'll have the light enveloping them a little bit. So I kind of put it on their shoulders a touch. See, when you kind of do that, you kind of put a little bit of that light on a figure like that. They kind of become kind of a part of the scene. I guess it's because they're kind of being influenced by the lighting, just like everything else is, so they're a little bit more kind of I don't know, yeah, I guess integrated into the scene. Okay, you can put a little bit of mist on the water. Like so. Alright, now I do have some an additional medium, I think, that may or may not work in here, but might as well give it a try. I have these kind of glitter gel pens. I think some of them are considered kind of neon-ish, maybe. Let me give it a try. Let me try to find one. I'm looking through a gigantic set of 180. Try to find the right hue. Okay, this one's supposed to be glitter. Yeah, it's a little bit metallic-y looking, maybe. It's hard to tell unless the light is hitting it. Okay, going over the top of dark paper really doesn't show up at all, but I have a feeling if you tilt it, yeah, if I tilt it like this, it kind of catches that light a little bit. See that right there? That clustering in there. Okay. I'm not going to spend my time adding a bunch of this if it, you know, there's no benefit whatsoever, so as long as it kind of shows up and enhances what we have going on, why not utilize it? I don't like some of that pigment ink right in here, so I'm kind of wiping it off. Which you can always do at any given time if you don't like something. Just go in here like this, and it buffs right out. Alright, that is a bit of blue. Doesn't really make a big impact whatsoever. So let me try something here. Let me try this blue here. Did I use that one? A little bit of a different blue, I guess. It's not too much different than the others. I might not need to add too much of this, or want to. One of the things about this blue, I wish I had a really super bright blue to go in here. But that being said, I want to create kind of a little bit of a stronger glow. Okay, so let me try this green. This is the glitter one. I need a more of a pastel green. Ew, look at this one right here. That's neon. Alright, now these aren't fireflies that we're doing, but so I don't want to add too much of this, but this is where you kind of stray sometime from your source material just for the sake of the scene, but I felt that it needed something. There's a, let me see if we can see it here. I put a little bit of green in here, down here. When I'm looking at this in person, I can see it, and it does glow a little bit more. It's a little bit more neon-y. But analogous colors on the color wheel, when you put them right next to one another, they create a color glow. So that's why I'm doing this green next to kind of the bluish tones. Okay, that looks good there. Let me see if I can see it. Yeah, see that kind of greenish tinge in there. I don't know. It's not like a monumental change or anything like that, but just that little extra touch. See how black that gets right in there. That's kind of what I want in here. Alright, do I want any of those hanging little... I don't think I want any of those hanging little bushes, but I think I'll just leave it as is, as far as that goes. But now I do think that if I spray this, I will kind of achieve a much deeper black. It always does when you spray seal something. But let me add a little bit more black to it, if I can find it. Where'd my black ink pad go? Thought this was green. It's black. All right, let's go up here a little bit more. Creating a little more variation in value. And when I finish this, I'll go and spray it. Okay. Alright, let's take a look at this. I like how that little passage turned out in there. It looks really kind of dimensional to me. Now let's see how this looks up here. This is supposed to be kind of the real star of the scene. Yeah, it looks okay, I guess. I want to spray it though, because I need to achieve a much deeper contrast up there than how it looks right now. So I'll do that, and I'll see if I need to add anything else in here. Okay. Alright, spray time. Let's go check that out, and I will come right back. Okay, that is sprayed with a Krylon Crystal Clear. There's various sprays out there on the market. This one just happens to be one that I have. I think I ran out of my UV ultraviolet Krylon sealant. But anyways, doing spraying kind of regain the value of those colors and intensities of them that I had when, you know, freshly stamped, and sometimes it dries a little bit dull. But one of the things that happens sometimes when you spray your scenes, it seemed like around here I had a little bit more white, and let me see, I thought I would give this a few minutes before I kind of went back in and add a little bit more back into it, but let me try to do it right now. This is a little bit wet. The Krylon tends to take a little bit of time to set up. Not, you know, super long, but let me see, I just don't want to stamp into a wet, sticky surface. But you can go back in and, you know, add more of this pigment ink. It's like going in and spray sealing, like pastels. You know, sometimes you lose some of the, you know, it darkens things, and that's what happens to kind of pigment ink at times when you spray it. What I do is I try to spray it from distance, seal it off, and then I spray it again. But you can always go back in over your spray sealant and just reapply to get those effects back. But after you spray it, though, you'll have the benefit of having the intensity of the colors that you've added. I guess, I don't know, I guess you could spray seal it before you apply this and not worry about it, but I usually add this in before I spray seal. Okay, going back in and adding a little bit around here to create more of that glow. When you add this into it, as far as the look goes, it adds kind of a nice element of a textural element of softness, you know, and an otherwise, you know, crisp, sharper surface. Okay. And having an element of just anything that's kind of soft in stamping is kind of nice, because texture is, you know, a key component to the, or visual texture is a key component within your kind of available vocabulary that you can utilize. You know, you can create in any piece of work. It doesn't have to be a scene. But having a kind of a range of textures is can potentially add up to a nice, rich surface than being kind of mono texture. Okay, so we have that. And my little tweaks here would be gel pens can kind of mellow out a little bit too, but if I want to go back in and add kind of a light element back into this area, I can by placing the gel pen dot on top of some of that, you know, diffusion. So you can have it below and above, so it's like you're kind of creating a multi-layered surface here, and the process becomes much more circular. It's not just a matter of adding ink, then you do this and this and this, and once you're done with one media, I mean, I can, you know, if I wanted to, I can go back in here and color this, you know, some more. You really can't add too much gel pen on top of the Krylon and have it stick because it's kind of sealed up. But things like alcohol pens, you can certainly go back in and add little details back into it. With the alcohol pen, you know, lays down on top of this just fine. Okay, so see up here, I'm just kind of adding that. See, I mean, it looks like a Milky Way up there or something like that, doesn't it? You know, or stars in some respects. Okay. Let's go back in and see this area down here in the water. Maybe can add a little bit more blue and some of these shadows, maybe. Lip plume permanents are just alcohol pens, these pens. this area around, right around in here. Brownish gray. Let's add a little bit of texture into these rocks. And it really barely shows up. But maybe I can deepen some of the shadows here and there. I don't have too many of those colors like in that brownish gray. Here's a just a cool gray. Okay. A little bit of rock textures. See, in many ways, I'm just reiterating what's already on the design itself. If there's a shaded area on the rock, on the design, then I'm just going in and adding some additional shading with my colors, be it dye-based inks with the Stylus Tool, or just these alcohol pens and just drawing them straight on. See, there's that little crack in the rock. Just going in and reiterating that with some additional tone, making it look a little bit more dimensional. You can do the same thing up here or throughout the scene. Alright, I think that just about does it. I don't think something else will come to mind. It might, but for the most part I think this looks pretty good as far as like a finished piece. Oh, I don't know. There could always be a little bit more texturing up there in those rocks, but I'm pretty happy with where it is right now. Alright, so the glowworm cave. What we have is, you know, I mean, this is a pretty simple composition. It took 1, 2, 3, 4, was it 5 stamps? It was the ledge. Okay. Small boulders with lichen, larger one. Ledge with brush. This and this. But that being said, you can do it with 2 of these. I mean, if you wanted the waterfall, you gotta have the waterfall in there, but you can just put, you know, this could have been down here too. Okay? So you can just have that figure down there and it could be glowworm cave sans waterfall. Okay. And you can, you know, I mean, that brush in there looks pretty good as far as a little bit of a variation goes. Yeah, you can just do it. I mean, this could be a 3-stamp scene, okay? And if you want the figure in there, you put the figure in there. You can put other types of figures in there as well. I guess you could put an animal in there if you wanted to, or if you had bats flying out of there. I don't know. I don't know if there would be bats in the glowworm cave. I don't think those worms would be in there if there were bats, because they'd probably get all eaten up. So anyway, pretty simple composition, just using a lot of the same element to fill in this space. I wanted a big area to create those, you know, those little effects, you know, representing those worms in there. So that's why I did it on this elongated format here of, you know, 4 1/4 by 11 inches. So pretty big and tall, you know, to really emphasize the subject of the scene, which is the worms. And I think we have achieved a decent looking surface of them up here. Okay, there's a lot of depth within that, you know, given space, being that I've used a few different tones, or a couple tones of different blues. And I don't know if we could see the metallic one kind of, yeah, there's a couple little things that kind of stand out a little bit more if I kind of angle it as far as that metallic pen goes. But you know, it's the same type of process right here, except instead of doing it against rocks, you'd be doing it this type of look against open, you know, darker colored space in the background. And this could easily be, you know, similar to like a galaxy or a Milky Way or something like that. Okay, so we have cools transitioning into warm tones down here, which is kind of nice because it does create a separation between this and the background. In order to create depth, and we have a frame of reference as far as how large this cave is supposed to be, because we have that figure down there, you know. And then here's the little bit of water going in there, but playing around with the rounding of forms by darkening the shadows of some parts of your rocks, like this. And that was, like I said in my previous video on how to approach that, but there really isn't like any specific area that you have to do. You can have, that could have been light up there, that this whole area in here could be dark, you know, it just depends on, you know, it's all up to you as far as where you want to illuminate things with something like that. So anyway, fun stuff, fun with glowworms in this scene today, and thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.